Namaste, sir. We are so grateful that you took out the time out of your busy schedule and sat down with us. We can't hear you, sir. Can't hear you, sir. Still can't hear you, sir.
I'm still not able to.
Yes,
Hello.
sir. Now we can hear you.
Can you?
Can you hear us?
Okay, super. All right.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Yes, sir. So I was just saying how grateful we are to you that you sat down with us for a
Sure.
discussion today. And we were left
Sure.
awestruck by the way you explained such complex things with such simplicity and your sheer knowledgeability on the factors of food and nutrition. And right then,
Thank
I
you.
think a week ago, we had made it a mission to sit down and have a discussion with you. And I'm so glad to say that that mission was a success. I would just like to reiterate how thank you we
Great.
are.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. So which sort of which grade are you guys in?
we're
We are
all
in
in grade
10.
10, sir.
Grade 10. Okay, great. Super.
All right. So let's start with more.
All right.
Yes,
Sure,
sir.
sure.
So,
All right. Let's get
Namaste.
going.
I'm Vibhore Pradhan, and I'll be asking the first question for the day. So,
Sure.
according to you, what is the definition of healthy food?
So this is it's it's both harder than you think, and at some level it's also easier than people tend to think. Okay. So it's hard because there are a million ways to eat healthy. The Inuits in Alaska live healthily. They have some of the lowest rates of diabetes and heart disease, and their diet is just seals and whales. No vegetables, nothing. It's just all of the saturated fat, all of the protein, and so on. But clearly their diet is very low in carbohydrates. It seems to be fine. But yet, if you go on social media, people will tell you that much saturated fat, animal fat is bad for you. Red meat is bad for you, and so on. They're eating the reddest of meats, right, and so on. And then on the other end of the spectrum, clearly, I think there are people who have a very carbohydrate heavy diet, like in the Mediterranean, like in France, like in many parts of India, and are still able to be healthy. So on the one hand, the first thing to recognize is that there are a million ways to define the concept of eating healthy. So it varies by culture, it varies by geography, it varies by genetics, and it's just too hard. So that's the complicated part. The simple part actually is essentially recognizing that eating healthy is about getting the right balance of the macronutrients, which is protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Roughly, broadly, on average, 50% of your calories from carbohydrates, 30% from protein, and 20% from fat. And within that, sort of trying to ensure that not more than 10% of overall calories come from saturated fat, and so on, seems to be the broad consensus of what is considered a balanced meal. And you can do this in many ways. Now, the other thing is it doesn't matter what fat you use, it doesn't matter what carbohydrate, it doesn't matter what protein, right? It doesn't really matter as long as you sort of roughly keep this. The second thing is that as long as you recognize there's a hierarchy of good to bad foods, and in general, you want to eat more of the good foods and eat the bad foods in moderation. There's no point to life if you're not able to eat a pizza or a Maggie noodles or a biscuit or a burger and things like that. But the idea is to be mindful. So that you might eat a burger one day, but maybe you eat a salad or something else the other day, right? So it's just about balancing and not breaking your head about trying to get every meal and every ingredient right. So definition of good essentially is low calorie but very dense in nutrients. Right? It has to be super dense in micronutrients, not macro. So very dense in micronutrients, but very low calorie. So basically, the only things that fit that bill are vegetables. So not fruits. So vegetables are basically the greatest things you can eat. The second greatest things are fruits, right? So these are again, but they have one negative aspect is that they have sugars, right? So but they come with all the fiber, they come with all the other things. So yeah, so they're great, right? And then you essentially have protein sources, right? Ideally, protein sources that are sort of high on protein but not too high on fat, right? So egg is super high quality, and something like pork, etc., would be like, you know what? I think there's a fair amount of fat that comes with the meat and so on. And as you kind of go down the processed meat aspect, then you get into all other problems because of the processing and so on, right? And then as you will see, sort of go down this hierarchy, you will find that you'll eventually get to foods that are high calorie but low micronutrients. So maida, any kind of ultra refined grain, and so on, right? So what you'll find is that in general, grains themselves are very low in that entire hierarchy. This is wheat, rice, millets. For all the hype about millets, they are still at the end of the day the same family of plants as rice and wheat. They are grasses. And grasses produce grains, and grains are high on carbohydrates, right? So they're not some protein. Even quinoa, for all of its greatness, is still ultimately something that is high on carbohydrates, right? And so, in the sense that you have to recognize that, so, but it doesn't mean, but at the end of the day, but you still have to eat a fair amount of rice. You're still going to eat more bread than you're going to eat. But being mindful of the fact that you need to eat more vegetables in general, I think is essentially the definition of health food. But people then waste their time figuring out, should I eat this vegetable or the other vegetable? Honestly, any vegetable is fine. But remember, it has to be low calorie. Therefore, potato doesn't count as a vegetable. Right? So root vegetables don't really count because they are high on carbohydrates. So you do want to consider vegetables that are low calorie: tomatoes, brinjal, spinaches, and all the other things that grow above the ground, if you.
All right, sir.
Thank you
So correct me
so
if you're wrong, but you are kind of saying that we should avoid over processed things and really focus on the raw materials like vegetables and fruits, and that would count as a good nutritional diet, right?
Correct. So in the sense that you should eat that more frequently. So I'm not saying. So at the end of the day, it would be ridiculous to say never eat a Maggi or never eat pizza or never eat. Yeah, that's just not practical in life, right? Um, but you've got to say that, you know what, you can take a Maggi and you can add lots of vegetables to it. And if you're not vegetarian, then you can top it with an egg. You've actually made that Maggi pretty healthy,
Hmm.
right? Or add
That's
paneer
a
if you're
wonderful
like
insight.
vegetarian, right? So, yeah.
Yes.
So the people are like, no, Maggi is poison. No,
Hmm.
it is not. It is just wheat. It's made from the same raw material, right? You go have a batura. A batura that is made from maida. The same thing that Maggi is made from. So for people to claim that a batura is healthier than a Maggi is silly. It's the same thing. It's about the amount you consume. See, if you're only consuming just eating Maggi and eating it like 5 times a week, that's not great for you because there are no micronutrients, no fiber, and then you're on your way towards type 2 diabetes and so on.
Right. That was a
So
great answer,
even a
I
slice of pizza, let's say even a slice of pizza, lot of vegetables on top. You're not eating 5 slices, but you're eating like 1 or 2 slices, right? And
Yes.
then again, so the people almost always think pizza meal means I eat pizza, then I eat garlic bread, and then I eat a brownie. Right? So that meal is, of course, terrible, right? But nobody is stopping you from saying, you know what, I'll start off with a salad. That way I'll feel a little bit full, so I can't eat 5 slices of pizza. Then I will eat 2 slices of pizza, which, by the way, has lots of vegetables on top and so on. And then I will eat, say, unsweetened yogurt or fruits for dessert instead of the brownie, right? So, so that I think you can turn a pizza meal into a healthy meal, right? So don't let people tell you that there is no way to eat healthy with pizza.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Before let's move on.
Yes, sir. So thank you for the wonderful answer. So, so you might be aware of the fact that our elders sometimes tell us not to eat certain foods with milk or like not to eat curd with moong dal together. So are there any common misconceptions or are these myths? Can you please tell us your perspective on this?
So yeah, so your parents or your grandparents are not going to like my answer, uh, but then again, I'm from their generation, so therefore, it's fine. So let me put it this way, right? Thousands of years ago, in every part of the world, uh, human beings have always been innately curious about trying to explain the world. That's how we've progressed. That's how we've made things like ChatGPT. We've invented mobile phones. We've invented cars. And the history of science and technology has largely been a continuous endeavor where people are always curious to explain things, right? So when you explain things, then the next generation is able to build on top of them and so on, right? So, and one of the hardest things to always explain is the human body itself. Right? You can take a machine apart, right? But unfortunately, you can't take a living human being apart. That would be a violation of human rights. So you can only do that, with dead people and so on. So even Da Vinci used to work with dead bodies to see how the body was structured, and he made these diagrams that were so useful eventually to first generation of people who became doctors and so on, right? So and particularly food becomes all the more complex because every individual reacts to food differently. We all react to food differently based on our eating habits, our genetics, the family, the cooking habits, and that. Um, like, for example, South Indians tend to be more lactose intolerant. North Indians tend to be far more lactose tolerant, right? So, therefore, North Indians consume dairy at a 3-4 times more than South Indians do, right? South Indians simply get their protein from fish or chicken. So, if you look at India, the South and East India is 98% meat eating. But the north and west of India is about 30-35% vegetarian. It's still not a majority, but the largest number of vegetarians in India are in the north and the west because it's the dairy belt. And because it is the dairy belt, and you have the Indo-Gangetic plain where so productive that you can grow so many crops and you can grow so much dal. And you have all of these pastures where you can get so much milk, and the green revolution and everything else, sorry, the white revolution and all of that happened. So you could get animal protein without the need to actually kill the animal. And again, remember, this is not so much a cruelty argument as it is a simple economic argument, right? So sun has certain energy. Only 3 or 4% of that energy is converted into the energy that you see in plants, right? The seeds you eat and all the stuff that you eat, right? Because photosynthesis is not very efficient, right? It's very inefficient, right? So only that. And then an animal further eats that, and only 10% or less than 10% of the plant matter that a cow or a goat eats is turned into the protein and the fat in its body that you then end up eating. Right? So therefore, the higher up the food chain you go, the more energy you're actually wasting, right? And so therefore, the higher the carbon footprint. So which is why, in general, from a sustainability standpoint, the idea is to try and eat more plants as opposed to animals, because it's just simply a sustainability thing as well, right? No, but at the same time, so therefore, you have so many variations and so on, right? And so you have to remember that when they tried to explain things, they did not have microscopes. They did not know the fact that bacteria existed. They did not know the fact that cells existed or enzymes existed. But they also knew that if I keep milk outside for half an hour, it will spoil. They knew that because you could visibly see it, right? They also knew that you have to take certain precautions when cooking certain things, otherwise it would upset your stomach, right? In terms of, if you undercook meat, it's going to upset your stomach, right? If you undercook fish, it might upset your stomach, and so on. So you have all of these sorts of different practical day-to-day observations that people are making, and humans being humans are trying to encode rules and try to explain it, right? And so, like how the Egyptians explained the flooding of the Nile, and said, no, it is Jupiter and it is sun and all of these planets, astrological alignment. That's why the Nile is flooding. Uh, but by Egypt in 1950 is not using astrology to explain the flooding of the Nile. Right? They're saying, hey, this basically the snow melts in where the Nile originates. And then during summer, so therefore there is flooding. Right? So it's now people have a better explanation for it. Right? So likewise, when it comes to human body, nutrition, and all that, every 100 years or so, we learn the micro better so that we understand why these things happen. So that's why it's important to look at all of these food-related rules. I'm not saying ignore all of them, but you try and see whether they still are relevant in the modern sense, right? Whether there are better explanations. And one of the things I've generally found is that these food combination rules, they are largely myths now. They may have made sense 2000 years ago when people did not have refrigeration. So things would spoil, right? And it was hot and tropical and humid. People did not have preservatives. They did not have freezing. They did not have cold supply chains, right? They did not have quality control and pasteurization of the milk. It was all raw milk loaded with bacteria, right? So a lot of rules related to dairy come from the fact that milk is super, super loaded with bacteria and a highly risky thing and a perishable good. So it's obvious that they made up a lot of rules just to keep people safe, right? In that it's easier for people to just blindly follow those rules without thinking and make sure that they don't, kill themselves or food poison themselves. But the world is completely different now. So you have to sort of consider what has changed. Right? We have the refrigerator, we have pasteurization, we have so many other methods by which we're able to stay safe. And the other thing is that now we also know more about the rest of the world. Like, for example, if people say you cannot mix milk and something else, Italians and French are doing that every day, right? So basic idea of making a sauce or whatever it is, pasta and all of that is mixing dairy and something else, right? So basically, and the people in the Mediterranean live 20 years more than Indians do. So clearly, it is also obvious that it's not detrimental to their health, right? So therefore, you can use that kind of more wider knowledge of the world and say, you know what, they seem to be okay. We can't be particularly be anything special, right? At the end of the day, uh, physiologically, I think the digestion systems and all work the same, right, for everyone else. So therefore, I think that is how you have to approach this. You can be respectful. You don't have to say no, no, all you old people are saying wrong things. But no, it's just that look, those knowledge came as a result of practical observations thousands of years ago, and it is clear. See, food is the only foreign object you put into your body every day. Okay, and there is every day for most of mankind's history, there was always the risk that it will kill you because you don't know what bacteria there is, right? You didn't have radiation, you didn't have pasteurization, you didn't have advanced cooking techniques, you didn't have advanced ways to prevent salmonella poisoning and things like that. So there is just, you don't know how old something is, right? Now you have expiry dates, you have preservatives, you have so many ways in which we are staying safe, where food poisoning is now very, very uncommon. So you have to recognize they come from an older world. So they are far more risk averse. Whereas I think, we just grew up in a more tech savvy world. It's sort of like how older people sometimes they know how to navigate maps. They are very focused on north, east, south, west, and all that. Nobody needs to understand that now because everybody assumes you have Google Maps. Nobody needs to understand celestial navigation. Can I find out where north is at night by looking at pole star? Most people don't know that today, but it was an essential skill if you get lost in the dark 1,000 years ago, right? So it is just that I think, as humanity progresses, what is essential knowledge, what is the new definition of risk, etc., keeps changing. And that's, I think, why I think you have to use that to appropriately question respectfully and then upgrade your knowledge.
Absolutely. They come from an older time, and we have to
Yeah.
respect their opinions.
Yep.
Let's continue, okay? Vinayak.
I'll
Good
just get
evening,
water
sir.
just 1 second. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. My name is Vinayak, and I would be asking the third question of the day. So, the question is that, like, after the pandemic, a lot of people have been curious about their health, and they have started going to gym, and this has resulted in death of many famous actors and many young bodybuilders because
Yes.
it comes in news that they have taken gym supplements. So, what
Yeah.
is your
Yeah.
opinion on that?
See, the first one of the hardest lessons I think people from your generation need to learn very early. And let me again tell you, this is also something that your parents' generation has not learned. Okay, and they will never learn. Right? But your generation has an opportunity to learn it, which is that the way you understand the world via how news works, via how social media works, has to be very different from your parents' generation. So I'm sort of like the transition generation. So I got access to the internet only when I was 17 years old, and that was dial-up internet. There was no Google, and it was not what we have today, right? There was no video, no YouTube, nothing, right? Um, uh, and so therefore, but my father's generation and all, like so and by the way, I still grew up all my teenage life in a world where India only had one news channel, which was Doordarshan, and it was government control, and whatever they told you was news, right? And so therefore, uh, and the newspapers were heavily censored. You got very little access to books during the Cold War because I think the West prevent. So India did not allow us to buy books from the West. We could only get books from the USSR, former Soviet Union, and so on. So in that kind of scarcity environment, people's ideas about news and their ability to distinguish what is important, what is no, it is just an anecdotal, extreme, rare example is very, very different because in that generation, the person who's reading the news, there would be this 20-minute section by Pranay Roy back in the day of when you learned international news. You trusted Pranay Roy to prioritize things for you, right? So there is a small forest fire somewhere in Orissa versus there is some huge, rainforest loss of, say, there is some loss of some tomato crop somewhere else, etc., etc. And he only has 5 minutes to tell you the news. He will pick the more important one and he will ignore the less important news. Unfortunately, the social media generation doesn't work like that. Virality algorithms are not about prioritizing the important, it's prioritizing the sensation. And your generation intuitively understands that better, right? So when you see a bit of viral news, you have a far easier way of really, you're very suspicious of anybody who goes viral, right? So you're suspicious of, you also know how content creators use language and use sensationalism as a way of making something that is small into something that is far more bigger. And in fact, half my job on Instagram is essentially telling people that that's really not important, right? When it comes to food, that when people say non-stick, it's cancer, etc., etc., boss, no, it's not really important. Right? You please focus on something more important and so on, right? So in that sense, this is a classic example of that, right? So one is that the pandemic essentially, obviously, made people far more conscious that they were sitting at home watching Netflix, eating food, Swiggy, Zomatoing, and growing fat. And all of a sudden, people became conscious and they wanted to go join the gym just as the pandemic ended, right? And they were doing that, right? And clearly, I think there is a lot more because of there is all these social media influencers, guys with these, six-pack biceps and all of these things, telling you can also do it and giving all kinds of crazy advice. People are doing a whole bunch of random things, right? So people are taking supplements without talking to a nutritionist. People are not realizing that, for instance, they may have things like, say, whey allergies, right? So if you eat whey protein and you have whey allergies, it's going to be bad for you, right? And people also, some people who may have undiagnosed kidney issues, right? And so all of a sudden taking a ton of protein supplements without working out hard enough, right? They'll take protein supplements and do walking, running. That's not enough. You want to lift weights, right? So the problem is, and then now what happens is that every day there is some media company, social media content creators, news companies figuring out what news should I report today. 20 years ago, the question was, what is more important? Now the question is, what's going to be more viral? And unfortunately, what's going to be more viral is the scary but completely trivial, rare example. There's something called the law of large numbers. You may not learn it now, but you'll eventually learn it, I don't know, maybe in class 11 or 12 statistics, or maybe later in engineering. It's a very hard idea in mathematics that says that when you think about multiple samples in a population, larger the population size, the more the likelihood that unlikely things will happen. So if you have 5 people in your family, the chance that somebody will die from eating a bad gym supplement is 0, is very low. Okay. But the chance that somebody in your housing society will die from that supplement is slightly higher. The chance that somebody in Mumbai will die is pretty high. The chance that somebody in India will die is 100%. Because there will always be some idiot somewhere doing something idiotic. And more importantly, it will become news, right? So the point is that's why when you look at the news is murder happened in Delhi. News is not, today there was no murder in Delhi. That's never news. By the way, today there was no murder in this suburb in Greater Kailash, and all these suburbs, there was no murder. That's not news. Brutal murder happened in East Delhi near Yamuna. That is news. So every time people have a completely distorted view of the world because you're forever keeping repeating rare events, right? And again, so that's the entire thing about gyms, these supplements. Of course, there is no doubt that there are deeper issues. Fitness trainers with no certifications are prescribing these things, and they're not doing a health check on the person, understanding their other allergies and their other heart issues and kidney issues, and doing that and so on. And there has to be regulation that happens. But it doesn't mean these protein supplements are bad for you. Actually, in a country that's famously protein deficient, for many people, it's actually important, right? Not as kids, yeah, but definitely for adults, very, very important.
Thanks a lot, sir, for giving such an insightful answer. So the main cause is just that we are not ourselves aware of things which are bad for us and which are good for
Yeah,
ourselves. We just go on
exactly.
things for our, like, if our friends suggest we have to take that, we just take it without researching on.
Exactly. And so the thing, you have to remember your friend. So today's world, people trust their immediate social network more than they trust experts. That's the problem. Your friends are not doctors, nutritionists, dietitians, and scientists, unfortunately, right? So, and everybody's getting their knowledge from WhatsApp, and that's it's surely going to be a problem. Yeah.
Sir,
Thanks a lot.
so in this world of sensationalization, how should we discern between things which are actually bad for us and things which might really cause no harm?
So that is it's a very it's a very hard question. So I think it would take a lot of time to really kind of go into that. There are, you have to learn. So there's for example, there's a framework for how to read the news, right? So when you read a news, right, uh, don't just say, yeah, this happened. 10 people died from poisoning, from say, or for example, we've lead poisoning happened in Maggie noodles. Just take an example, right? That Maggie contains lead, right? So you read a story like that. Most people just read that and go, oh my God, company is trying to poison us. That's the immediate reaction. But I think an intelligent digital native, your generation of people have to ask a series of questions. First question is, like, who wrote this? Right? Is there a conflict of interest there? Right? Did the people who came up with the story and are amplifying and promoting the story, uh, perhaps they also have an interest in introducing their own noodles to the market and so on. Sometimes conflicts of interest exist, right? Second thing is, uh, how did they find this out? What test did they use? Are the people who are talking about the fact that lead was found also talking about what were the tests used? Are they linking to the actual study where the data and the test and the methodology? You'll find that most media stories never link to actual studies. They just say, according to this study, but they'll never link to it. All these news websites never hyperlink to actual studies at all. So they never give you the details. So you should always be skeptical when people don't link to the actual data, actual methodology, right? The next thing is, yes, okay, who performed that test? Do they have any conflicts of interest, right? So in the sense that there are ways in which you can, but I know I recognize that trying to go through life, trying to apply this kind of skepticism to everything you see is hard. But when it comes to high priority things related to food and health and all that, I think people should be skeptical.
Sorry to say that our meeting time is about to end. Could I send a different link to you right after this on
Sure, sure, sure,
email
sure,
and
sure,
you
sure,
join
sure.
that?
Yeah,
All right.
go ahead. Yeah, all right.
Very sorry
Sure.
for the inconvenience. We'll just send the
I
link.
know this is quite normal. Yeah, it happens also. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
मैं recording सुन रहा था बे.
Welcome back, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Hi.
sir, you are. Let's
Yes.
continue, Kabir.
Sure.
Yes. Namaste, sir. My name is Kabir. So, my question for you was a lot of people have delved into dieting and various measures to keep their weight under control. Some people even ventured into products such as Diet Coke or sugar free. So, according to you, are these sweeteners as beneficial for us as they're advised, or do they, over a long time, negatively impact our health?
So this is sweetness again is a very controversial topic because the answer is different based on who you ask and what category of people you're really talking about. So if the category of people involved are people who have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and they're largely in the West, and culturally they kind of drink these, Coke kind of drinks, regularly and so on, then the answer is it's absolutely great for them. It actually keeps their diabetes and their overall health much better because I think, it's not spiking their sugar at all, right? Because these are no calorie sort of drinks, and there's no sugar in that and so on. If that is the target audience, then the answer is yes, it's actually good for them, right? Now, for people who are otherwise healthy and are looking to, say, lose weight, right? But they've sort of become obese and they're looking to lose weight. And as part of that, they want to cut out sugar in their lives. And they have their morning tea or they have any of these other, right? It's not about Coke or Pepsi, right? People also add a lot of, actually, by the way, people sometimes add more sugar to tea and coffee than to many of these other drinks in India. And for example, you have to remember that an orange juice has more sugar than Coke. Okay, so but it is still a better drink because at least it has all the micronutrients and all of that. But still remember that it has a ton of sugar. So for those kinds of people who are looking to lose weight, again, the answer there is that yes, it is a good short-term solution. Meaning that while you are doing many other things, like generally eating less food, working out, doing many other things, if you are doing all of that, on top of that, switching to a sweetener completely gets rid of the sugar, because I think sugar really gets in the way of your weight loss. Okay, any amount of sugar you use will prevent weight loss. So therefore, for those people, short term, again, good. But the problem is regular, normal, healthy people who generally want to stay healthy. And they're like, no, you know what? I'm going to cut out sugar from my life and I'm going to long term consume this as a replacement for sugar. The problem is there is no evidence that it actually helps. And there is, in fact, some evidence that it harms you because, see, the reason we love sugar is because we have evolved so that our taste buds, when you put something in your mouth, it's telling your brain, you prepare your digestive system, something, a lot of good calories are coming, right? So it's a way for us to detect high calorie food, right? And so what happens is that these molecules tend to trick the taste buds in your tongue that this is sweet. But once it goes into the small intestine is like, ye to dhoka ho gaya, I'm not able to extract any calories from this. So it will then send a signal to the brain saying that, make the person eat more, right? So problem is, in some percentage of population, people who eat a lot of these sweeteners end up quietly consuming a lot of other snacks and calories because they got these cravings, right? So sometimes in some people, they end up gaining weight. And then again, there are known concerns about long-term concerns about whether long-term consumption of some of these sweeteners also harms your gut bacteria. Again, like for example, right? So the idea is that anything you cannot digest, your gut bacteria will eat. That is great for dal. That is great for vegetables. The reason dal and vegetables are great is because you're leaving a lot for your gut bacteria. Right? So, but when you eat meat, when you eat maida, when you eat those things, you're leaving nothing for the gut bacteria. You're taking everything. Okay? So therefore, because there is no dietary fiber and so the problem with sweetness, again, your body can't digest. So your gut bacteria is expecting, oh, okay, now at least I can get. And they find these strange molecules and they have no idea what to do. And sometimes it has been shown that they could end up producing some really bad stuff, right? And upset your gut bacteria and so on. And there have been a few studies that show that very excessive use has been linked to some cancer in rats and all of that. And again, classic social media exaggeration recently about aspartame and the fact that they're going to declare it a possible carcinogen. Clearly, nobody read the IARC's definition of possible carcinogen. Even apparently, your mobile phones, aloe vera, all these things are also supposed to be possible carcinogens. Category 2B essentially means that it's not likely to be carcinogen. Okay? Or that you have to eat 36 Diet Cokes a day continuously for several years for it to have the dose that they find is that nobody's going to eat 36 Diet Cokes a day. So the point is that that ultimately, I think the answer is complicated. If you're diabetic, yes. If you're someone looking to lose weight on the short term, yes. But if you're a healthy person wanting to lead a balanced diet on the long term, there is no evidence it works. So, and you don't need to do it. I think it's better you just consume less sugar, just get used to less sweeter things, and eat desserts as special occasion dishes and not like 5 times a day, right? Like every time you're hungry, you go into the fridge and eating one chocolate. If you're that kind of guy, you might want to change that behavior. Switching to sweeteners is not going to help you.
Thank you,
Sure,
sir.
sir. I completely support your notion on sweeteners. So, my next question for you was that a WHO report says that processed meat is carcinogenic. I've heard that you have mentioned some of your opinions on that as well. So,
Yes.
so some toxic substances like arsenic, cadmium, and lead have also been identified in this processed meat. So, how
Yes.
do you envision the industry responding
Yeah.
to this issue of consumer concerns
Yes.
regarding increasing use of insecticides or
Yeah.
pesticides in farms identified as carcinogenic?
Yeah. So again, you have to always remember carcinogenic, class 1 carcinogens are the most dangerous carcinogens, okay? Anything class 2, 2A, 2B, etc. are all, you'd have to consume a lot of it for you to have the higher risk of exposure. And again, remember, you'll find that there are lots of people who will consume a lot of this and not get cancer at all. Remember, human beings are phenomenally complicated and hard to predict, right? But again, this is statistical, right? So at the end of the day, you first have to remember that even with processed meats, it's considered a medium risk, meaning that there are people in Italy and Mediterranean who are eating processed meats every day. That's part of their culture. Okay? So they've been curing meats for thousands of years and they've been eating, right? Now, clearly, I think it's pretty evident that in like an American style diet where they're not eating anything else healthy, on top of that, they're eating these sausages, then there's a problem. But the Italians, on the other hand, they eat salads, they eat fish, they eat so many healthy things. And then eating some amount of processed meat is not going to really harm, right? And then so you always have to remember that, right? And so therefore, with processed meats, the way to think about it is to say that you want to keep their consumption down to relatively moderation, meaning that, yeah, you eat it for breakfast, it's fine, but make sure you're eating many other vegetables. Again, if the meal is healthy, I think your risk is lower in general, right? If you're only eating that and nothing else, then you're increasing the chances of that risk. That's really all there is to it, right? So, but you say that with food, no, the problem is that, your anything deep fried, okay, again has a higher carcinogenic risk. This applies to puri, it applies to chapati, it applies to anything dark brown, black in color is technically speaking higher carcinogenic risk. But are you going to stop eating chapatis? Are you going to stop eating anything deep fried? Right? You're not, right? So therefore, you have to think about this as a right. How can I make sure that I'm eating many other good things and I am reducing the number of times I'm exposing myself to this? It is never zero. It's quite interesting, right? Because alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen. Do you know the global consumption of alcohol? Nobody seems to be stopping. Alcohol consumption is increasing, right? So the point is that and the processed meats are not even remotely as dangerous as alcohol, right? But everybody's talking about processed meats. Nobody's talking about alcohol, right? So people are wasting their time on aspartame and so on. So that it's a medium risk at best, right? So the other thing about heavy metals is a separate issue, right? Again, it goes back to our energy, right? That you need only 1% of the energy of the sun goes into a plant, only 10% of the energy of the plant goes into the herbivore. Then when you eat the herbivore, and then if section of your if there is a food chain, every time there is a 90% loss of energy, right? Along with energy loss, you are also concentrating all the bad things. So, for example, if the soil had mercury, lead, cadmium, because there's a factory nearby and it leached these metals, right, into, or it leached the metals into the river. The river deposited the metal somewhere where you're growing. Okay, these are all complicated things. Okay, and depending on the plant, different plants absorb different heavy metals differently. Right? So rice is notoriously good at absorbing arsenic. So that's why brown rice is always considered a slightly higher risk because it's the outside coat that has arsenic. Okay. So that's why people tend to actually polish and eat the white rice more. And if you're eating brown rice every day, then you're at the risk of arsenic poisoning. So because you have no way of knowing where the arsenic there is. So some amount of arsenic is going to get into your plant itself, right? And now let us say you're feeding the crops you grow, the grass that is growing there in that soil to some goats. You're eating the goat. Okay, the concentration of arsenic or cadmium in that goat is going to be higher. Because every time you go up the food chain, things are going to get concentrated. And where this is particularly worse is in the sea. Because on land, we human beings are typically at the top of the food chain, and we are only typically 2 or 3 steps away from the sun. Meaning that we eat herbivores, herbivores eat plants, plants from the sun. That's it. Only have these 4 steps. But when you eat tuna, or one of these sort of large sea fish, right? Tuna eats fish, that eats fish, that eats fish, that eats. So tuna is actually an apex predator. Eating a tuna is the land equivalent of eating a tiger. So you're eating a carnivore already. So that is already eating other fish, and that fish is also eating other fish. So the food chain in the ocean is much deeper. Somewhere one tiny fish may be eating plankton, but everything else is eating fish, right? So what happens is that when you eat fish, the concentration of heavy metals and all in fish is much higher. So this is where there's a problem, because we're polluting the oceans and so on. So forget the risk from land stuff. The risk from fish is much, much higher, like heavy metal poison. So this is not an easy problem to solve, right? You can't, the food industry cannot, after a fish is grown, somehow figure out a way to remove the few atoms of heavy metal. And we know that even a very tiny number of atoms of lead or cadmium are super toxic, right? So I think this is a longer, deeper problem where people have to agree not to pollute the ocean, right? People have to agree to try and not eat carnivores and try and eat lower down the food chain. So that's why they always say that people who eat seafood, eat a small fish. Please don't eat large fish. The large fish are likely to be carnivores. They eat other fish, right? Try and eat fish that eat plants as close to this thing as possible, right? But then the problem is that the smaller the fish, the smellier it is. So, and only interestingly, rich people eat the big fish, exposed to more heavy metals. Poorest people in India eat the small fish. They're actually eating healthy. So, and again, in general, I think it also means that you have to keep factories away from fields, and you have to regulate the fact that they cannot pollute the environment, and that there have to be ways in which you're checking the things that are going out of factories and being dumped into rivers. And if factories that are poisoning and adding these heavy metals to the soil and rivers, you've got to be able to, penalize them and fine them and create an environment where they are not incentivized to do this, and so on. And I think, there are other weird problems also. This is heavy metals are this one level of the problem. Yeah, so most people don't realize every time you eat a tablet, right? You eat a crocin, right? Which has paracetamol, right? That's the active ingredient. Okay. So 95% of the paracetamol that you ate, okay, within the next 6 hours will go out of your body via your urine. Because your body has a fantastic system that takes any foreign object that it doesn't recognize and remove it. Okay. That's what the kidney and liver does. Okay. And so that's why when the doctor gives you medicine, you would think, okay, I'm taking so much medicine. Why do I need to take it like 3 days, 3 times a day? You need to take it 3 times a day for 1 week, because 95% of that stuff you're eating is going down with your urine. Okay. And that urine is going back into the soil. So right now, the problem is our soils are filled with antibiotics. What that's doing is that it's killing bacteria in the soil. And what do bacteria do? What do the survivors do? They mutate and they end up producing bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. And now all of a sudden you have tuberculosis and these newer versions of tuberculosis that none of our antibiotics are working. They're called drug resistant tuberculosis, drug resistant. So there are other serious dangers, So heavy metals is still a relatively small problem. So in a sense that I think the food system is so complicated. The recognition that we all have to figure out a way to, one, definitely address pollution, address climate change, address warming of the oceans, address dumping stuff into the ocean. There are too many problems to fix that. So the problem is India can't fix this, right? Because if China is polluting the ocean, there's nothing you can do. The fish in the Bay of Bengal are going to be filled with mercury. So this is a global problem anyway. So that you guys have to grow up and solve. So not my problem. No, we'll all be dead by then.
That was a perspective altering answer, sir. Everything is so much deeper than it's perceived to be. So let's move on to the final question of the day. Sir, you might be aware of the fact that certain ice cream brands don't advertise their products as ice cream and rather as frozen dessert.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
Nutella, which is used as primarily as a chocolate spread, is actually classified as edible
Yes.
oil. How can we
Yeah.
as consumers tackle these companies' underhanded tactics, and how can we be more aware of what we are putting inside our bodies?
Yes. So the one hand, I think it's important to be more educated about how to read labels and how to spot marketing disinformation, right? So, like for example, I mean, it's clearly marketing and misleading to call a Bonvita or a Boost or a Complan healthy, because it's just so much sugar that you have no business calling it healthy. Yes, it has many micronutrients. It has fortified with all the vitamins. And again, for a growing child, they can handle that much sugar. It's really not a problem. But there is now growing evidence that no, giving that much sugar is not really great, right? But then again, try convincing a 5-year-old kid to eat ragi. Okay? It's not going to happen. Right? So we have to be practical about it. So it's important for so what you see is that in countries that sort of mature, and you'll see European Union, for example, having more stricter rules on what you have to disclose and what kind of marketing terms you can use, especially for products that are targeted at children. There are very, very strict rules on what you can put in the products and what you have to declare is there in the product, and so on, right? So there is those kinds of things. Okay? That is one aspect of it. So clearly, just more transparency, regulation in labeling, and public awareness of some of these things is important. But there is also another equally important angle to realize, right? You also have to recognize that the ice cream versus frozen dessert is as much about corporate competition as it is about some very honest fight against unhealthy products and so on. Because ice cream, is it healthy in the first place? Okay, it is really just a high calorie, super sweet, high fat, zero fiber thing that you enjoy in moderate quantities once in a while. That's what an ice cream is, right? Just because it's made of cream and it came from dairy and it is more natural does not make it healthy. Okay, so health-wise, a frozen dessert and an ice cream are nutritionally the same. Let's not fool ourselves that somehow ice cream is healthier, right? You first have to recognize this lawsuit actually goes back to the dairy industry in the US that was losing market share to the likes of Unilever and all these guys, figuring out ways in which they can create the same texture, sweet experiences without going through the complex mess of running a dairy industry. See, dairy industry is like super complex to run. Why? Because you have to deal with cows, right? You have to feed the cow, you have to make the cow grow, then you have to make the cow pregnant, then you have to take the milk, then you have to pasteurize it. It's a messy, complex, expensive industry. It perishes, etc., etc. On the other hand, being able to emulsify vegetable oil and get the same texture as what you get in a cream, then adding a bunch of these other additives and so on, and making a product that roughly has the same mouthfeel, and using dried milk solids that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to run a dairy farm now. So clearly, they were losing market share. And these ice cream companies were like, no, we will file a lawsuit and say they're not allowed to call themselves ice cream. That's the origin of the lawsuit. It wasn't like, no, our product is healthier, etc. It was like, I want to make more money than this guy, and he's not allowed to make money. Is basically the root of this thing as well. So the public also needs to be aware that many of these other battles are not for your nutritional benefit or health benefit. There is nothing remotely healthy about a Nutella or nothing that is a chocolate spread can be healthy. Let's be absolutely certain. Because people always tell me that, it is not, the major ingredient is actually sugar. I said, okay, fine. Can you make a Nutella with less sugar? You make it, you will spit it out. The public will not buy, right? So let's be honest. It's something that you want to eat, and that's the only economic way to make it, right? And palm oil is the cheapest fat, and or vegetable oil, other than vegetable oil, and then you're going to use as little hazelnuts as you possibly can. If you want to get that smooth flowing texture, you can never get it from nuts. That's food science. You do need starch, so you do need to eat cornstarch. You do need to add xanthan gum and things like that, and that's how you get that kind of texture. So I think first people need to stop pretending that they were getting something nutritionally important from Nutella. It's something that you eat because you love the taste. Okay, it's not healthy. It was never healthy, and there is no healthy version of Nutella, first and foremost. So therefore, I think that entire debate is pointless, right? And ice cream versus frozen dessert is basically two multi-billion-dollar companies fighting a lawsuit over who gets to sell their product and who gets to call their product what name. Okay, neither of those products are actually healthy. This is not like somebody made a red-colored biscuit, okay, made out of like ultra-processed starch, colored it dye red, and then sold it as tomato. Then yeah, I can agree that the real tomato is healthier than this biscuit tomato, right? Given the current prices of tomato, that may very well happen, right? But ice cream is not even remotely healthy. So I think this is just so people also have to recognize what their priorities are. You want to enjoy a frozen dessert, enjoy it, and you also remember frozen desserts are way cheaper, right? So we may be rich, we can afford real ice cream, organic fruits, and all of that, but the Aam Aadmi cannot, right? The guy who delivers your Swiggy, Zomato, when that guy wants to enjoy something cold, etc., he's going to buy a frozen dessert because that's what he can afford, right? So only question is that it should not food poison, right? But let's not pretend that it's somehow less healthier than your ice cream.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you sir,
So
for the wonderful answer. I just had one question from you. What are the alternatives for these unhealthy things like ice cream, like alternatives which are better
Yeah,
and healthier? Like as you said,
yeah,
not
yeah,
everything can be much
yeah.
healthy and everything.
That is true, right?
Yeah.
So again, as I
So
said, no, I think again the answer varies by age. So if you were 50 years old, I would tell you that instead of an ice cream, consider eating a really delicious like mango, like particularly one of the Ibam Pasand, certain kind of varieties that are naturally creamy, jackfruit, super sweet, super creamy, have lovely flavors. And so you're craving that sweet and you're craving that fatty textures, and eat some avocado and things like that. You can sort of tell people, older people to do that. But it's a very hard sell to tell kids that eat fruits. Okay, right? It's a very hard sell, to be honest. So I would actually say that rather than look for healthier alternatives, focus on saying that, look, if I eat it once a week, let me make it once in 2 weeks. If I eat it twice a week, let me make it once a week. Right? So be mindful of that, and also say that, okay, you know what? For every ice cream I give myself, or it's like a it's like a temptation I give into. I will therefore eat extra portions of vegetables, and so you can do all these kinds of things. That's a better way than to try. So because I think the problem with trying to find healthier alternatives, then you'll find companies will come and tell you that yogurt is healthier than ice cream. Okay. And then because yogurt is sour, they will add 5 times more sugar in that. Although epigamia, strawberry, yogurt, more sugar than ice cream. So it's not healthy, right? But they tell you it's yogurt, fermented, probiotic, it is great, etc., etc. But boss, you added so much sugar because kids don't like sour tastes, right? You appreciate sour taste only as you grow older. Okay. So because yogurt is sour, they have to add tons of sugar. They also have to make sure that the yogurt is not really well fermented. So it's not even that healthy to begin with. Okay. And they have to use very high fat Greek yogurt. And so therefore, I think then use the moment you're looking for healthier alternatives, companies will then use marketing to fool you. Right. So either say that, you know what, the truly healthy alternative to an ice cream is half an ice cream. Truly healthy alternative to an ice cream is eating fruits. Okay. But again, that may not necessarily always, satisfy your cravings and so on, right? But yeah, because not all fruits are sweet, right? Because people who are diabetics, they should not be eating sweet fruits also. They should be eating guavas and things that are not very sweet, right? So it is just that I think always be wary of trying to search for healthier alternatives. Like a millet biscuit is not healthier than a maida biscuit. It is still a biscuit, right? Most of the calories in a biscuit come from fat, not from the carbohydrates. Okay. And because millet tastes like cardboard, they add a lot more fat to make it taste better. Right? So be aware of that. Look at the labels, right? So don't be fooled by trying to search for a healthier ice cream, healthier pizza, healthier biryani. These things don't exist. Okay. The healthier options of these are actually smaller portions. And then if you still feel hungry, then fill it up with the healthy stuff, which is salad and vegetables and, blocks of cheese. So my son is, 10 years old, right? And, so he keeps opening the fridge. He's also starting to grow big, and he's like opening the fridge. He's forever hungry. I'm sure you guys are. And so earlier he would open the fridge, he'll find some chocolates and all that, right? And now I've hidden the chocolates, and it's like only cheese cubes are there. So he's like, okay, fine, I'll eat the cheese cubes. So at least he's getting the calcium and the protein and so on. So again, think about the fact that you can never beat your willpower. Okay, you always have to change your environment so that you don't let your temptation find it too easy to get those unhealthy things. Right? So always keep the cookies inaccessible. Always keep these things. So work hard for it, or set up an incentive where yes, I finish homework, I do this, then I treat myself to something. I finish some project, I learn something, then I treat myself to something. Is a better way to do this than to find healthier options, because then that makes people do very crazy things. Like Indians believe, like sabudana is a fasting food and all that. It's ultra processed starch, and they think it is healthy because it is fasting food. And why is it fasting food? Because Indians don't like not eating. So even when religion says don't eat, they'll say, okay, what does religion say? No rice, no wheat. Oh, but they didn't say sabudana, so I will eat sabudana. So potatoes, sabudana all came much later. So Indians will eat anything that ancient Indians didn't know about and call it fasting food. Right? So I think let's don't get into that sort of temptation. Anyway, I do have to go now.
Yes, sir.
Great chatting with you guys,
Thank you so
and I
much.
hope it helped your
It
project.
did. It did.
And
Yes.
We'll hold
great.
an assembly
All
to
right.
show this to the other students, because this was actually very, very enriching, and I'll make sure that everyone gets access to this. Thank you so very much. This helps us out
Thank you
Thanks a
way
so
lot.
more
much.
than you
Thank
think.
you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks.
a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.